Hello everybody, welcome to another Town Salem video. Today I am going to talk about the differences between TOS1 and TOS2 town rules. I am going to share my thoughts on which version I personally prefer, and I'll go over the rules in both games. After I go over all the rules that are in both games, I will then proceed to go on to the rules that are only in one game. So without further ado, let's get into it. So first up is Amira/Guardian Angel, and for this particular duo, I prefer Guardian Angel a lot more than I prefer Amira. I personally like Guardian Angel as it's neutral role, and I know a lot of people have problems with neutral roles and the fact that Guardian Angel, after their target dies, they become a survivor and then therefore a Kingmaker. I know a lot of people have problems with Kingmakers. Personally, I never had a problem with Kingmakers in games, but know a lot of other people do. Still, I enjoy like the concept of Guardian Angel and protecting someone and trying to keep them alive. It makes the role a lot more fun, and it's also kind of laid back as you don't usually have to worry too much about what's going on, just making sure that your target lives, and it feels really satisfying just to protect your targets successfully as Guardian Angel. As for Admire, it has a lot of the same concepts, but I think it's done poorly, especially since now it's a town role. When the game first came out, I actually kind of really liked Admire, and I bought a bunch of scrolls for it, just because the role is kind of the counterpart of Guardian Angel, which was one of my favorite roles from TOS1, so I bought a bunch of the scrolls. Either way, the more I played Admire, the more I kind of liked it less and less. I think the main thing that I don't like about it is the fact that you die when your lover dies, or if you die then your lover also dies. It kind of ruins the point of giving them protection, because now all of a sudden all you need is one of you to die and then evils basically get a double kill. Also, the fact that you can only propose twice and then if you get rejected both times, it's basically like, well, that's it, you're doing nothing the entire game. And honestly, if you propose to evil and then you get blackmailed, like a lot of times that doesn't happen until later in game, and being blackmailed and not able to vote can easily get COVID majority, especially if you wait like a few days with how fast the games go. There is also the fact that well, the most optimal way to play this role is, in my opinion, propose to a T-Pal that's already confirmed, have them reject you, and then just do nothing the rest of the game. Just be confirmed. That's like the optimal strategy, and it makes the role very boring compared to Guardian Angel, which has to actually do something within the game. Even after you die, you're still doing something, whereas in Myra, you're not really doing anything. Okay, next up is Amnesiac. So for Amnesiac, I prefer the TOS1 version, mainly due to the fact that it's neutral and you can pick whichever role you want to be. Another reason that I prefer the TOS1 version is because I did a lot of custom in Town Salem 1, and one of the main modes that I always did in custom was Amnesiac Revenge, which basically required like Amnesiac being able to pick any faction, and made for a lot of chaotic gameplay. Whereas in TOS2, the problem is, since you're a town role that's just kind of like delayed, it makes the role very boring. And the fact is, with custom, I do have an Amnesiac Revenge list for TOS2, but it's just not as fun as the TOS1 version, where Amnes can go all over the place, whereas the TOS2 version, they can't really do that much, except wait for people to die and then they all just become the role. So for that reason, I prefer the TOS1 version of Amnesiac. Bodyguard is next. Both TOS1 and TOS2 version of Bodyguard are basically the same. I don't really have a preference, but I think that if I had to choose, I would go with the TOS2 version of Bodyguard just because of the extra vest. It kind of makes it more viable as a role. Like, it balances out because a lot of the other TPs are a lot better, so allowing it to have a second vest is probably something that makes it more on par with other TPs, but otherwise both of the roles are very similar and I don't have a major preference. Okay, next is Cleric and Doctor. Both roles basically do the exact same thing, but just different names. Again, not really a strong preference. I don't even think that there's like a major difference, but if I had to choose one that I prefer, I'm going to go with the Town of Salem 1 version, and the only reason is because of the mayor interaction. The Town of Salem 1 doctor can't go on mayor and the button doesn't show, so you don't accidentally go on mayor and do nothing, whereas with the Town of Salem 2 version, you can go on mayor, but it doesn't do anything, so it's not good design in my opinion, because a lot of new players will still go on mayor, and I've seen it, and it's just kind of something that I would prefer that they got rid of. But otherwise, the roles are quite similar, and since I know not to go on mayor, I don't have a preference. Crusader is another role that is very similar in both games, with only like one minor difference that I can think of off the top of my head. So the Town of Salem 1 version couldn't kill vampires, and the Town of Salem 2 version can. So for that reason, I do prefer the Town of Salem 2 version, because I always thought that the Crusader vamp interaction in TOS1 was kind of weird, and for like the one exception that it has when attacking people. So for that reason, I prefer the TOS2 version, even though vamps are only in one mode. I have played Dracula's Palace in TOS2 somewhat, but not a lot. So for the most part, Crusader kind of the same in both games, but I definitely prefer the TOS2 version. Okay, Investigator is one of the roles that actually had a somewhat major change. So personally, I prefer the Town of Salem 2 version of Investigator, mainly due to the fact that the results are a lot more simplified, therefore evils can fake it more easily, and overall it makes the game more interesting. However, Investigator can still find evils somewhat consistently, and since they got the blood thing kind of reworked so that any roll that kills shows with blood, I definitely prefer Investigator a lot more now. For Seti and TOS2, I don't have like a major opinion on it. Like, Percepting is somewhat good, but usually useless. I really only use it night 1 on the TPLO claim. Otherwise, I don't use it. As for 2S1 Investigator, I still enjoyed the role, but having the exact results of like, it could be like 1 of 3 to 5 rolls, just, it made it slightly less fun because it's harder to fake, and just the fact that it's easier to fake now, that's like the only reason that I prefer Town of Salem 2 Investigator to Town of Salem 1. Jailer and TOS1 and TOS2 are really similar, but the one major difference is that Jailer and TOS2, when you execute somebody wrong, you can no longer jail. And for that reason, I prefer the Town of Salem 2 Jailer, just because you actually get punished for making a mistake more than you do in TOS1. TOS1 Jailer, I think one of the major problems was the fact that you could keep jailing someone over and over and over again. And although that could be fun while playing Jailer itself, it did make some modes kind of unbearable, mainly TT if anybody's ever played that. I didn't play TT a lot, but another problem was a mode that I did play quite often was Dracula's Palace, or sometimes I would do my own custom version of Dracula's Palace, and jailer could just jail the youngest vamp that was caught by LO and just keep jailing it over and over again until the town got the rest of the vamps, which were usually pretty easy to figure out. And of course, you can do the constant jailing with like any role. So obviously, I prefer the TOS2 version that can't constantly jail. And I also like the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, that you're actually punished, where in TOS1, all you do is lose X's and you can still keep on jailing. So for that reason, I prefer the Talent Salem 2 version. Okay, Lookout is one of those roles that are quite similar between both games, but there are some changes. So TOS1 Lookout, you can only see 3 people at max, and if there are more, it will just tell you like more people visited, but you couldn't get the names. And then TOS2 version, you can see everyone. Also, TOS2 version is Astral, while the TOS1 version isn't. So my personal preference for Lookout is I do prefer the Talent Salem 1 version, and I think the main reason is just due to the fact that Talent Salem 1 isn't Astral, which I feel like is very important, especially for rampaging roles like Werewolf and Berserker or Juggernaut. The fact that you don't kill a low while going on like a T-Pow and you can still get caught just kind of ruins the fun, so I prefer the TOS1 version of LO because of that, whereas TOS2 version, which wouldn't die to a rampaging attack, I just don't like that as much, so I prefer the TOS1 version of Lookout. Okay, next up is Mayor. Mayor, very simple role. In both Talent Salem 1 and Talent Salem 2, Mayor gets free votes, can't be healed. However, the one major difference is that Mayor and TOS2 can be whispered to, Mayor and TOS1 cannot be whispered to. And I feel like I kind of prefer the Talent Salem 2 version of Mayor. I like that it's like in the town power slot versus the town support slot, because it makes Mayor kind of in an area where it's more balanced in the alignment it's in, whereas in TOS1 it wasn't. I definitely played a lot of custom lists, and TOS1, usually instead of doing Jailer as the main person, like the one confirmed townie, I usually did Mayor instead because Mayor's more fun. But I like variety and like the power slot in TOS1, even though it didn't actually exist. So I really like the alignment chains and the more variety in the T-Pow slot, and I'm glad Mayor's there. So I prefer TOS2 version of Mayor, mainly due to the whispering and the new alignment being T-Pow. Psychic, it received a small change when the game first came out, with TOS2 version allowing you to visit, and the TOS1 version you couldn't visit. And now that it's later in the game, they also changed how the nights work. So night 1 is a good night now, and night 2 would be evil night. So personally, I definitely prefer the Talent Salem 2 version of Psychic. It's a lot more fun to play when you're actually visiting someone and can use it more strategically versus relying solely on RNG. So if you know how to play Psychic well, obviously on nights when you get good people, you try to visit evil people. That way you're more likely to confirm someone as good, and then of course on even nights, which are evil nights, you go on someone good. That way the other two, it's just a one that is guaranteed to be evil, instead of trying to figure it out between 3 people. So it's a lot more fun and rewarding to actually visit, versus TOS1 version of Psychic. I really hated TOS1 Psychic because you basically did nothing, just got numbers. So for that reason, I prefer Talent Salem 2 version of Psychic. Okay, next up is Retributionist, and I feel like this role definitely got the best buff between the games, and it made the role like a lot more enjoyable compared to the TOS1 counterpart. So in Talon Salem 2, the one change that they made is that you can reuse dead corpse, so now you're not like useless for half of the game. Versus in TOS1, you couldn't reuse the same corpse twice, so if town wasn't dying and all that there was a sheriff in the graveyard, you could only use it once, and then you did nothing. Made the role really boring. Versus in TOS2, only a sheriff dies. Sure, you can only use that sheriff, but you can keep on doing things like night after night after night, even if town does like a perfect game. So for that reason, I definitely prefer the Talon Salem 2 version of Retributionist. It's a lot more fun, and currently Retributionist and Talon Salem 2 is my favorite town role. So yeah. Okay, so Sheriff is one of those roles that I'm a bit more indifferent to because it kind of works mostly the same. However, I do think that the TOS1 version was probably slightly more enjoyable just because you could find more people. Because you had both Mafia and Coven, which you could find all suspicious. And you also had a couple of NK serial killer and werewolf. However, the TOS2 version, not as fun. You can only find 3 Coven, and with book passing, if Coven is playing strategically, once the Coven gets checked by a sheriff, like you can assume that they're not going to get checked again. And because of that, you can pass the book to somebody else that might get checked later, and then sheriff just becomes even more useless than it was before. Versus in TOS1, you couldn't do that. So it made sheriff more useful, and obviously, at least with Mafia, like, there's a good chance that even when it got down to one person, that person would still show up as sus, because Mafioso still shows up evil. However, with Coven, of course, once you get down to one Coven, they're always going to show good in TOS1, unless it's Night 2 or Night 1, but that doesn't really matter that much. However, the one good thing about Talon Salem 2 Sheriff that I really like that they changed is that they made vampires show suspicious, which I think makes vampires more enjoyable, as now you got more TIs that can catch them, so makes it a little bit tougher and makes Sheriff a little bit more enjoyable in the second game, as long as you're actually playing Drax, which almost nobody does, but so that's probably like one of the few benefits that I have from TOS1 to TOS2. I don't like how TOS2 Sheriff can find neutral evils as sus, just because like Jester being like the main problem, it makes Jester really boring because all you have to do is wait for Sheriff to find you sus and you just get hanged. Don't really have to do anything. However, overall, I definitely prefer the original, just better overall. Okay, so Spy got like a big change from TOS1 to TOS2. You no longer see Coven and Mafia visits, and the bugs are a bit better in the TOS2 version, as they stay until they're triggered, so kind of like a slight buff, but the fact that you no longer see Coven or Mafia visits is definitely a lot worse. So Spy is like one of those roles I didn't really enjoy in either game. I felt like Spy was always kind of like boring. You could do more stuff in TOS1, but still, it rarely ever did anything except maybe if Mafia was playing poorly with Consuelare and just kept on claiming invest, and then that invest keeps on visiting or Mafia visits. It's kind of good, but anybody that's smart and kind of delay their results so they're a bit more off and harder to catch. Either way, I think if I had to pick one, I'm going to go with Town of Salem 2 version just because I don't like both, but at least the Town of Salem 2 version makes it so that the deceptive roles like illusionist, enchanter can actually do their thing without being like caught instantly. Like even if a TI found someone sus, then TS1 spy would be like, oh, Mafia visited, so Framer. Versus in TS2, you have to be on the exact person, so makes the evil slightly better, so for that reason I do kind of prefer the second version of Spy. Okay, next up is Tavern Keeper and the TS1 counterpart being Escort. So personally, I'm going to say that I prefer the Town of Salem 2 version, mostly due to the fact that you can't perma or be like whoever is killing. Does kind of make the role less fun to play as, but to play against it definitely was a much needed change. That way you don't have Mafioso that's constantly being roadblocked over and over and over again until you lose everyone as part of your Mafia team. So, Tavern Keeper, I definitely prefer it, though playing as the role, I definitely prefer the TOS1 Escort just because it's more fun to RP the same person over and over again, especially if you find Mafioso. It's very satisfying, but the TOS2 version, not roadblocking again and again, was needed, so therefore I prefer the TOS2 version. Okay, so Tracker, I think this is actually the only role that just did not change. Like, it's the exact same role like it was in TOS1 and in TOS2. Go on person, see who they visit, and that's really just it. Both roles are the same, so no preference. Okay, so next is Trapper. Trapper between TOS1 and TOS2. The only thing I can think of is like a small difference because whenever your trap attacks someone, you don't see all the other visits in Town Salem 2, where in TOS1 you can see exactly who visited. So personally, I think I'm going to prefer the Town of Salem 1 version. Just gets you more information, and Trapper being one of the weaker town protectives, in my opinion, just because of how slow you are. I think that the extra information is needed when you do attack someone, just to see who saw all that went on them. Makes it a more enjoyable role, but the TOS2 version, not too far off, just no longer getting as much information, but overall, I just prefer the Town Salem 1 version. Okay, so Veterans only changed from TOS1 to TOS2 is the fact that now you can be RB'd and it's no longer unique. And because of that, I do prefer the Town Salem 1 version that can't be RB'd and is unique, because you actually can do something and you're not going to be screwed over just because, oh, well, Coven has a poisoner in the second game that can RB you and just kill you, and you had no counterplay. So, TOS1 version a lot better, can't be RB'd. So, Coven or Mafia in TOS1 will always have to, take more a risk when killing vet, where in TOS2 you can just do it and pretty safely just kill them off, and yeah, so definitely prefer the TOS1 version. Okay, so the final role that is going to be in both games for Town is Vigilante. This one, small change. TOS1, no hangman, you just died the next night, versus in TOS2, you would die instantly if you shot wrong. And personally, Both are very much the same, and I don't have a huge preference over which one I like more. But I do think that I prefer the um 2S2 version just because you die more quickly, so a bit more punishing for making a mistake, so that's like the only reason why I prefer the 2S2 version. As evil, you have some teammates that would sometimes accidentally kill the already dying Vigi, and it's like a wasted kill, and that sometimes messes with majority. So I like that it dies instantly, so evils don't make a mistake of killing a already dying person. So for that reason, prefer the second version of Vigilante. Okay, so now it's time for roles that are exclusive to their own game. So first up, we're going to be going over all the TOS2 exclusive roles. So Coroner. Coroner's kind of similar to Invest and Sheriff from the first game. It's another town investigator role. You find one evil person, check if they're evil, and then go on to the next person. The only difference is there's a day ability where you autopsy, but otherwise it's kind of similar to Invest and Sheriff, like I said. Just click on person, see if they're evil, if not, move on. I don't really like Corner that much. It feels very weak in TS2, so my opinion is kind of bad on it, but it's alright. Okay, so next is Deputy. Deputy is most similar to Vigilante. All it is like a day Vigilante with a powerful attack. Personally, not the biggest fan of Deputy. A lot of the day's kills in TOS2 just makes the game a bit worse because a lot shorter games and you just have people like blasting each other always. So makes the game less fun. Don't really like Deputy that much. But if they had like less day killing rolls I can maybe enjoy it, but otherwise I don't get much enjoyment out of this roll. Okay, so next up is Marshall. There's not really any TOS1 version of the role that is really similar to. Closest thing I would say is Mayor just because of the extra vote, but otherwise it's just kind of its own thing. Get to lynch 2 people. I mean, it's enjoyable as a town power role. I feel like it's one of the more balanced town power roles as you're not like solely in charge, you have to rely on other people like Mayor and Monarch. So I actually kind of like Marshall for that. So you're not like fully in control, but still have like some extra power, making the role more enjoyable. So for that reason, I actually kind of like Marshall. And another role similar to Mayor is Monarch. It's the only difference between Monarch and Mayor is you're basically giving your votes out to other people, and you gain defense for having knighted people alive. I really like Monarch as a town power. Like, it's not too overpowered, but it still does its job well. Very similar to Mayor, and I really like Mayor as a town power, so overall, really like Monarch, and that's really it. Okay, so another town power, this role is probably similar to like Jailer and Vigi. It acts like a town killing as you just lynch during the day. Also similar to Deputy and TOS2, but I'm mostly trying to compare TOS1 and TOS2 versions of roles, so I'm going to compare it to Jailer and Vigi. But not a big fan of Prosecutor. Mainly, again, day kills. I feel like there's way too many. I feel like Marshall and Prosecutor both kind of do the exact same job, just Marshall is slightly weaker as it has less control, and I definitely prefer Marshall, and it having less control over what happens makes it more hard to use Marshall. The only thing about Prosecutor that makes it worse than Marshall is the fact that if you get someone wrong, then you die instantly, similar to Vigi. And overall, I just don't like Prosecutor. It's not just too many day kills. That's really it. Okay, so next up is Seer. This is probably most similar to Psychic in TOS1, so um I'm going to have a lot of the same points that I did with Psychic, like the TOS2 version of Psychic, compared to the TOS1 version. So Seer kind of works the same. You look at two people, yours shows up friendly or evil. If they're friendly, it's most likely that they're towns, so it's kind of like a Psychic good night. And if they're enemies, then obviously one of them is evil, or both of them could potentially be evil, but it kind of acts like a Psychic bad night in a way. So personally, I really like Seer. I find it as a very enjoyable role. It's a bit overpowered, but it's also easy to fake. It's probably like one of my most common fake claims if I ever get like a neutral role. It's very fun to play as and very fun to fake. So overall, really like Seer. Okay, Socialite is one of the more unique roles that got added to TOS2 and is exclusive to Town Salem 2. I would say it's a mix of Cleric, LO, and Tavern Keeper. So, very unique role. A bit too easy to confirm, but I feel like it works really well. Not too overpowered. There's some strategy to it, so I do like the role. Wish it was a little bit less confirmable, but a lot of the TS slots are very easy to confirm, so it's not too big of a deal, but overall, I think I really enjoy Socialite and how it plays. Okay, so Trickster, this is an interesting one because it's gone through like so many reworks. Originally, Trickster was supposed to be kind of like the new Transporter. I never really saw it as that. I kind of see it as like a QS2 thing, completely separate from Transporter. I never really got that through my head. So I always saw it as a unique thing, even the very old version that just redirected attacks onto someone else whenever somebody attacked them. But either way, Trickster nowadays kind of works like a Cleric and Vigilante hybrid. So you protect someone, if they get attacked, then you can attack someone else. So it's kind of a good mix. I think that this role is very fun to play now, just because you can do a lot with it. Like, being a TP-TK hybrid obviously makes it one of the more fun roles. This is like one of the few roles that I would scroll in Town Salem 2, so overall, really enjoyed Trickster and the newer version of it. Okay, so now it's time for the Town Salem 1 versions of all the roles that are exclusive to Town Salem 1. So first up is Medium. Now, with the Town Salem 1 roles, I really enjoyed 2 of them, really hate the other one. So Medium is one of the ones that I really enjoyed, and I really miss Medium. However, I do understand why it's gone now, just because relying on dead chat and people staying, probably not the best thing for a role, and it made Medium pretty weak. But since I was mainly playing custom and people stayed in custom, made the role a lot more enjoyable and actually my second favorite town role in Town of Salem 1. So overall, I really liked Medium. It was a fun, laid-back role, and I wish it would be back in TOS2, but I understand why it's not. Okay, so now for my favorite Town of Salem 1 town role is Transporter. I really love Transporter. It's very chaotic. The fact that you were kind of like a mix between a TP and a TK, and you can kind of like make Mafia kill themselves or Coven kill themselves, made the role very fun. Definitely get why it's probably not in Town Salem 2. I think that the main reason is because of the VFA thing, and the fact that as Transport, you basically have to come out and claim like your actual role, otherwise it's just going to cause a bunch of confusion and Also, if there's multiple, then even more chaos and more confusion. So obviously, I feel like that's one of the main reasons why it can't go into TOS2 is like you have to claim your role, otherwise it would be detrimental to town. But I really do miss it. I hope that eventually it gets added back because I would really enjoy it, especially in custom. I had like a list solely based on transporters that I really miss playing. But anyways, yeah, I really enjoyed Town Salem 1 Transporter. And now we come to my least favorite town role in all of Town Salem 1, which is Vampire Hunter. Vampire Hunter, it was kind of similar to Trickster, at least kind of like the reverse BG version of Trickster, where it's like very low risk and like low skill also. You can just go on people, and if they're not vampire, nothing happens, but if they are, then vampire dies. It's a very hard counter and was arguably worse than Town of Salem 2 reverse BG Trickster. Like, the reverse BG Trickster was kind of like low skill, but at least it was balanced in my opinion. Like, it probably wasn't fun to play as or against, but the fact that all it was a reverse bodyguard made it balanced, like, so it wasn't too OP. Versus Vampire Hunter. It's kind of a mix of very overpowered and very underpowered, just depending on which mode you're in and how many vampires spawn. So if you're like in Dracula's Palace, the fact that you have Vampire Hunter basically means that you just win, because it's very unlikely that vampires can maneuver around the Vampire Hunter, which is like killing every single night. And you don't even need that much skill to like stake a vampire, and the fact that even if vampires just visited you, that you would still kill them. So overall, very overpowered role. I'm very glad it got deleted from TOS2, and it's probably like one of my favorite parts about Town Salem 2 is just the fact that this role no longer exists. So yeah, really hated Vampire Hunter. Okay, so that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts on the town roles and which ones you prefer. And with that, that's going to be all. Please subscribe. Bye.